Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. My name is Constance and today we are continuing our Home Ec with Constance series, and we are working through a group of lessons all about leavening. And so far we have done a basic informational lesson all about the different types of leavening. We have done a recipe that used baking soda. In our last lesson we did a yeast bread recipe. And in this lesson, we're going to do a baking powder as leavening recipe. This recipe is for a very timely, great for fall or autumn apple coffee cake recipe. Now, this is a recipe that's been on my website for many years, but I thought I would take this opportunity to make it for you and walk you through the process. Now, if you missed the lesson all about the different types of leavening, you can find that in the Home Ec with Constance playlist, and I will put a link to that playlist in the video description down below. And as always, when you're doing a recipe, especially if it's a new recipe, you want to read through your recipe before you get started. Make sure you know the steps that you're going to need to take. Make sure you have all of your ingredients, that way you're not stuck in the middle missing something and you've got half of your ingredients already combined and you've got to run to the neighbor's house to borrow a cup of sugar or run to the grocery store. So always read through your recipe before you get started. So to begin, we're going to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. Now this apple cake has diced apple and it also has a streusel or crumb type of topping. We're first going to mix our dry ingredients. We need 3 cups of all-purpose flour. And we're going to combine these dry ingredients in a small mixing bowl. Leveling off our ingredients to make sure we have the proper amount. All right, 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Next, we're going to add our leavening. We are going to use baking powder. And we're going to need 1 tablespoon of this. Next, we're going to need a teaspoon of salt. And I'm just going to take a little whisk and I'm going to mix my dry ingredients together. You could do this with a spoon or a spatula, whatever utensil you've got handy. You just want to kind of mix those dry ingredients together. All right, now we're going to set this bowl of dry ingredients aside for a few minutes. Next, I'm going to need my mixing bowl with an electric mixer. You can use a stand mixer or a hand mixer, whichever one you have. And we're going to cream together some ingredients, which include our fat, which is room temperature unsalted butter, with our sugar, which means beating the ingredients together until they get creamy and fluffy. So this recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup of unsalted room temperature butter, which ends up being a stick and a half of butter if you buy your butter in sticks like this. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in 1 stick. And then I'm going to need a 1/2 of a stick. And I'm going to go ahead and beat the butter just for a minute to let it start getting soft and fluffy, and then we'll add in the sugar. Now, just a little tip, when you have your wrapper that's kind of coated with butter, you don't have to throw this away. What I do is I just fold it on itself to keep all the butter on the inside, like that. I stick it in a Ziploc bag and I keep it in my refrigerator, and then when I have a pan that I need to coat, such as a cake pan, I take one of these out, I let them sit on the counter to warm up just a little bit and get soft, and then I can take this wrapper and spread the butter all over the pan. And then that butter that was stuck to that paper doesn't go to waste. Now, because we do have a cake pan we're going to need to coat, I'm going to go ahead and just set this aside for now, and we'll use it in a little bit. So next we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in our sugar. This recipe calls for 1 2/3 cup of granulated sugar, which is your traditional white sugar. We're just going to go ahead and add this in with the butter. 1 cup. One-third. And 1 2/3 cup. All right. And now we're just going to beat this until it is nice and creamy and fluffy. Now I'm going to measure 1 1/4 cup of milk using a liquid measuring cup. And again, as I've shared before, when you measure liquids and you've got glass like this, you want to look at the line at eye level to make sure you're looking straight through the glass to make sure you have the exact amount. All right. So now we're going to grab our dry ingredients. We're going to mix about half of the flour mixture into the butter mixture. Then we're going to add in the milk, and then we'll add the remaining flour mixture. And each time we add something, we'll mix it in completely before adding the next. It doesn't have to be exact. You don't have to measure it or anything. Just kind of make it about half. Now when you add in a bunch of dry ingredients like this, if you turn your mixer up high really quickly, you're just going to have flour and baking powder and everything just go whoosh everywhere. That's what this little cover is for, to kind of hold things in. But you also want to start low as the flour begins to mix in, then you can speed up the mixer. So start it on the lowest setting first. And then just gradually speed it up. Okay. Now this little spout right here is for adding ingredients without having to take it off. You can just put it in right through there. But I just find it easier just to pull it off and add in my ingredients. Alright, we added the milk. We're going to mix that in. Okay, I'm going to take my rubber spatula or silicone spatula and I'm going to scrape my bowl. Make sure everything is mixed in, because you can have some of those dry ingredients sticking to the bottom or the sides of your bowl. Now we're going to add in the rest of the dry ingredients. Alright, scrape the bowl again. Make sure everything is mixed in. Okay, so right now I'm done with my electric mixer. So I'm just going to pull off the beater, and I'm just going to kind of tap this on the side to get all of this cake batter off of there. Now I still sort of need a mixer, but I do not have two bowls for this particular mixer. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use another mixing bowl with my immersion blender using my whisk attachment. Because what we need to do is we need to beat 3 egg whites until they form nice stiff peaks. So the first thing we need to do is separate our eggs. When you need to beat egg whites, they should always be room temperature. So I've had my eggs sitting out here on the counter, just like the butter. Break the egg. Okay, there's one. Two. Whew. That was close. And 3. Alright, so we're going to be very careful when we're doing this because we don't want egg whites to go everywhere. But we're going to go ahead and mix this until stiff peaks form, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so you can see that the eggs are nice and fluffy. And you can see when I dip into the eggs how there's a point that comes up and it doesn't fall over. Now if that point fell over, that would be considered soft peaks, but this is stiff peaks because they stay pointed up, and that's what we need. So we're going to take these nice stiff egg whites and we're going to put them into our thick batter. And then we're going to fold them in, and I'll show you what that looks like. Now when you stir a batter, you just go round and round and round. But because we just made these nice fluffy egg whites, we want to keep as much of that air as we can. And so we're going to fold. And by folding, we just take our spoon or spatula and we turn the contents of the bowl over and over. You want to use that wrist a little bit, and over. You're just kind of flipping it until it's all mixed in. It's kind of a gentle way of stirring something in and maintaining as much of the air as possible. So we're just going to gently do this until the egg whites are mixed in. So now we're going to set this aside for a minute. We're going to get our pan ready. Okay, so we need to grease our 9x13 cake pan. And like I said, we can just use our butter wrapper that our softened butter was in. Since it's nice and coated with butter, we will put this to use. We're just going to wipe all that butter all over the pan. Make sure you get into the corners real good, because a lot of times people will miss those. All right, nice and coated. And now we're going to take our cake batter and we're going to spread it into our cake pan. I'm going to spread that out. All right, so we got the batter spread out in our cake pan. We'll set that aside for now. Now it's time for the apple. And I'm going to start by peeling my apple. Now I like to peel my apples with a paring knife, and you can see I kind of scoot the knife around the apple, and I use my thumb to keep myself stable. I don't move the knife very quickly. I move it just a little bit at a time. And by keeping my hand stable with my thumb like that, I'm not going to cut myself. But you can also peel this with an apple peeler or a regular vegetable peeler as well. Now I'm going to dice my apple, and I want to dice it into pretty small pieces, maybe about 1/4 of an inch little squares, because that will allow me to spread the apple all over the top of the cake. So I'm going to take all of these apple bits and I'm going to spread them out all over the top of the cake. Now I used to make this with slices. I would slice the apple into thin slices and just arrange them all over the top very pretty. And while it looked pretty when I was making it, it kind of made it a little bit difficult to actually cut the cake and get through those slices. And so I found that dicing the apple into little bits like this made it easier to cut the cake. It also made it easier to eat it and get, you know, bite-sized pieces. Okay, so we've got the apple, and now for the topping. Alright, so for the topping, I'm going to need, again, 3/4 cup of butter. So I'm going to use the other half of the stick that I was using earlier. And then 1 more stick of room temperature unsalted butter. And again, I'm going to keep these butter coated wrappers folded up, put these in a Ziploc bag, and stick them in my fridge for when I need butter on a pan. Alright, I'm going to need 1½ cups of brown sugar. Found my missing spoon. And a lot of times I get asked, are you using light brown sugar or dark brown sugar? And frankly, I use them interchangeably. Dark brown sugar just has a richer flavor, more of a molasses type of flavor, and the light brown sugar has a more delicate flavor. So it's really just a matter of preference. And you'll see when I'm measuring brown sugar, I'm packing it, I'm pressing it down in there, because you want to make sure that your measuring cup is completely filled. Brown sugar can have all sorts of space in there because it's a very sticky sugar. And by pressing it down, you know you've got a full half of a cup, whole cup, or whatever it is that you're using. All right, I'm going to need 3/4 a cup of all-purpose flour. I need 2½ teaspoons of cinnamon. Now we need to mix these together. I find that the easiest way to do this is with a pastry blender. And I'm just gonna push it through and twist and just kind of keep doing that until it's all combined. And we'll take my knife, get it unstuck, and just keep on going. Alright, the last ingredient we need is some chopped pecans. We're going to need about a cup. Now this isn't something that has to be precise. You can use a little bit less, a little bit more. It just depends on how many nuts you like in the cake. And so I'm just going to use what I have left here, and I'm going to chop it up using my ulu board. This is a cutting board that I got when I lived in Alaska, and it is made for one of these. This is an ulu. It is a traditional native Alaskan knife, and the curved blade rolls inside this concave cutting board and helps everything that you're cutting stay together. I find it very handy for chopping nuts. Now I'm just going to stir the chopped pecans into the mixture. Now with clean hands, I'm going to take my streusel mixture and I'm going to kind of break it up and sprinkle it all over the tops of the apples. So there you go. This is going to go into the oven, 350 degrees for 40 to 50 minutes, or until it's done when we test it with a toothpick. And I'll show you when we get to that point. Alright, to test the cake, to make sure it's done, you take a wooden skewer, a wooden toothpick, stick it down into the middle of the cake, and when you pull it out, you might see a couple of crumbs, but you just don't want to see batter. As long as you don't see batter, you are good to go. Now we're going to let the cake cool here on the rack until it's just barely warm or room temperature, and then we can serve it. Alright, so there you go, friends. Scrumptious apple coffee cake. Now, at the beginning of this lesson, I talked about leavening, and I mentioned that this recipe was a baking powder leavening recipe. However, if you were paying very close attention, and if you watched the full video about the different types of leavening, you know that there was actually two kinds of leavening in this recipe. Did you catch that? Yes, there was baking powder in here. However, another ingredient that incorporates air into the cake batter was egg whites, which is also a type of leavening. So that is it for today. If you would like to make this recipe, you can get a printable version of it on my website, and you can get a link to that recipe in the video description down below. That is it for today. Thanks for joining me here again in the Homestead kitchen. My name is Constance from Cosmopolitan Cornbread, and I'll talk to y'all next time.